Hello and welcome. I am Kate Holmes, host of the Innovating Advice Show, here with the very first live streamed podcast. So if you're joining us live, welcome. Please feel free to put comments in throughout. We will pose them to the wonderful guest we have today, Natalie Yan-Chatonsky, joining us from Australia. Let's bring you on, Natalie. Hello.
Hey, Kate. How are you?
I am cold, Natalie, but it is so wonderful to see you looking all warm and beachy in Australia. So I'm soaking up some heat through our virtual conversation here.
Sending it on.
Thank you. We might be getting some snow flurries during this conversation. So if you see me peeking out, I'm just looking to see if those are starting to come down. So we are talking today about a conversation that is actually very sort of near and dear to me. It's something I'm very passionate about, and it has actually driven a lot of what I have done throughout my career. So in the first 8 years I was in the profession, I worked for, it was the family business, but it was just an investment advice business. And a lot of it was focused on helping people heading into retirement. And my degree was in photography, so I didn't have any of that training about how this worked. And I spent years just being fascinated with all these people that were within, 2 to 3 years of retirement or even within a year, and conversations over and over again of people more or less saying, hey, I don't know what I want to do in retirement. I just don't know. I know I don't want this job anymore. I know, honestly, maybe I don't want this marriage anymore. I don't want to live in this home now that my kids are grown. So it was a lot of, I know what I don't want, but there wasn't a lot of knowing what you do want. So Natalie, that's how you help financial advisors and planners change those conversations so the clients do know what they want. So tell us a little bit about how you came into this and how you're helping change that conversation from what we traditionally think about retirement to living a full-time life.
Sure. My journey actually started off from a personal point of view. It was my parents who really sparked me to think about what's happening to baby boomers. So my parents are baby boomers. They're immigrants from Hong Kong, moved to Australia more than 40 years ago, and they're extremely hardworking migrants, first generation in Australia. And I guess it was very much out of my concern for my dad, who is very well respected in his career. And they had a lot of family relations with my mother and brother, and really trying to think about what do we need to do to support dad for when he retires. Now, he's in his mid-70s and he's nowhere near retirement. So what has been very interesting for me on my journey is really understanding what is it to lead a meaningful lifestyle. And then what I realized that my own definition of what does retirement mean, which is probably quite redundant in this day and age of living to potentially 90 or even 100 for our next generation. So there's so much that's shifted, and there's probably not enough stereotypes and models, positive role models that actually help people, parents, to really think about, well, what is the next chapter after a really successful career? So I started doing a lot of research into it. I started off by carrying out interviews with people at different stages of retirement, people in my network. And then a lot of those people said, gosh, have you thought about building a business around this? Let me introduce you to more people to interview, because all my friends are really in this dilemma where they can't quite figure out what to do with their lives because they've had such amazing careers and they've been really busy. They haven't really had time to think about what's the next step. And those who have gone to the next level of actually leaving their careers and going into a life of leisure have often peeled back and come back to me to say, actually, I learned so much from trying it, realizing I wasn't quite ready. A lot of people ended up going back to their previous jobs, or they did a variation of the same thing, but they weren't particularly happy. And so I guess it's the stop-start process for people who abruptly leave work without actually thinking about what would be a meaningful, healthy, connected lifestyle beyond paid full-time work after a really long, successful career.
Yes. Well, and it's interesting when you think about who are good role models. I actually, for a long time, I'm going to say 15 years now, have used Betty White, the wonderful comedian, as a great role model of someone who has continued to work and do amazing things because she loves what she does. And just in the last week, she turned 99 and she's still hilarious. And that gets you thinking about all these actors and actresses. You have musicians that still play and tour into their 70s and 80s. You have politicians that seem to never leave. So you've got all these careers, and they say, if you do what you love, then you're not really working a day in your life. We know all of that is a ton of work, but it always got me thinking about how, if you're a musician or you're an actor, you can kind of start and stop working, right? It's not like it's a Monday to Friday, 9 to 5, where you're necessarily going to get burned out in the same kind of way as somebody with that full-time life. So I started adopting that years ago and saying, okay, how can I take more mini breaks throughout life? And I took 3 months off in late 2019 because I had been saying this for so long. I was like, I want to experience it. What does it look like when I have no idea what's next? Before I started innovating advice, I didn't know. I had no plans because I wanted to go through that experience of what I had talked with clients about for so long. And it was interesting. And I realized I can't sit still. And I'm not someone that's just going to sit around all day. And I have to be, actively mentally engaged in stuff and giving back and helping people. So, what kind of conversations? I know you've got 5 key ingredients that you always talk about. So,
Yes.
a lot to go through in there. Which one of those 5 do you want to start with?
Well, let's start with purpose. That's what you've just described in your own life, in what you do for innovative advice. It gives you that sense of purpose. It is linking your skill set, your knowledge with what the world needs and what the world needs. So, and it's also something that you love. You clearly enjoy doing these podcasts and talking to guests from around the world and linking it with your expertise. So that's a really great example of Ikigai. And Ikigai is a concept in Japan. It's something that's quite inherent in Japanese culture, especially in Okinawa, which is the most southern part of Japan. It's quite an isolated island. It has its own culture. And it also has the longest life expectancy in the world, let alone in Japan. Wow. And so Dan Buettner, who came up with the concept of the blue zones, which are 9 different factors for a long, healthy life, basically identified that this Ikigai was extremely important in terms of ensuring people do lead healthy, meaningful, and long lives. So in Okinawa, which I've gone to visit on a study tour, people are incredibly curious, and no matter what age, they want to engage with outsiders. They want to know what you're doing there, and they want to share their knowledge with you, and they're really well rooted. And that's something that we're probably missing in Western society, that revere for elders and that integration of older people in the community, whether it's in a business or in the community in terms of, various different jobs, whether paid or volunteer work. It gives people a sense of meaning, and Ikigai defined by Westerners as reason to get out of bed. So I think it's a lot more than that, but I guess that's probably what gets many of us out of bed if we're really clear about what drives us to make a huge difference. And it can be paid work, like my dad. I've realized actually he's better off continuing to do what he does because he has a lot of community engagement. He's well respected by his industry. It is his Ikigai. So I realized for my father, let it be. But then for others who may not necessarily want to continue doing the same type of work forever, it's actually getting people to think much earlier and plan for it and try lots of different things in their life there's in their midlife, that's the opportunity while they're still really busy to, try different things. And it doesn't have to be having 2 careers going on at the same time, but it can be running short experiments, little projects, building your community. So that brings me to the second ingredient. Community is so essential in a long, healthy, meaningful life. And I think there's been more and more research that's come out around longevity that attributes social connection to longevity, happiness, as well as healthy well-being. And that's something that's probably come into mainstream awareness over the last year, when it wasn't just older people who are experiencing loneliness. People who have been isolated because of COVID-19 have experienced it to varying degrees, but having greater empathy. Well, what does happen if I eventually retire and I can't go to work every day? Have I got other outlets for connecting with people? And face-to-face connections are incredibly important. In terms of, there's been a lot of research around how it does improve people's well-being, reduction of chronic health, and also it opens new opportunities. So people who really care about you and know you well will reflect back to you in terms of what are your strengths and what they value about you. And they open up opportunities for you. So it's also being open to new people and possibilities if you make space. And that's something that we really have to do much earlier than the 1 or 2 years before retirement. It's something that you have to cultivate. It's not just building up your financial wealth, but your social capital much earlier.
Yes.
And that's something that a financial advisor can play a role in terms of getting their clients who are at their midlife to really consider all the essential things, not just the tangible things like where they're going to live and, how much wealth do they need, but have they also considered where are they going to move, and do they have really strong relationships and community engagement and contribution towards those communities that they might be intending to do a sea change or a tree change to.
Yeah, and I want to go back on that first one for a second, because you were talking about those short experiences and experiments. And how would you specifically recommend that people do that or have that conversation with their clients to get their clients to have those little short experiments throughout their, you said, sort of their midlife?
Yeah, so I think the value of that we've found that our financial planners have been getting from working with full-time lives has been having, I guess, a broader open conversation with their clients on the outset. So not necessarily diving straight into goals or the financial aspects of their lives, because that's one part of it, and wealth is one of the 5 key ingredients. But you need to think about it holistically. So it's really getting those planners to think about these 5 key ingredients and have that open conversation with their clients. So talking about, well, what does give that sense of purpose or guide, and who is their community, who is important to them, whether it's family members or much broadly, who values their skills and how they can contribute, because that then affects their well-being, which is the other ingredient in terms of mental health and physical health. And potentially those are the people you can do things with. And then the 4th ingredient is lifelong learning. So similarly, you can go on a journey of lifelong learning with lots of different communities, different people in your life, people who are close to you, as well as new people that you can create new experiences with. So we give the 5 key ingredients map to our financial planner partners. We also give them access to our 5 key ingredients quiz, which enables them to give their clients a method for actually measuring, rating themselves when it comes to these 5 key ingredients, and having a starting point, because then they can look at their score, their transition quiz score, to then identify, well, where can they start by running a short experiment. So I realized it's a lot, having, finding a sense of purpose, to find a new community that you really can contribute to, and having, vitality in your life and lifelong learning and enough wealth to do all of that. So it's breaking it down. And I think that's the key of picking something that resonates with you, something you can do now and within a week, being really clear about what you want to offer. Not necessarily about the outcome, but it's more about just identifying something that you want to learn about yourself or the environment around you, and how do you fit into that, to then be able to see, is this something I want to invest any more time into? Should I go further? Have I learned something interesting about myself? I like it, or I don't, in which case let's move on and really change your life for it. And
yes,
discovered that it's something that you enjoy doing, or you want more information on, you want to do research, then set yourself another experiment. So this is very much a common practice that we use in innovation. It's called design thinking. So it's really discovery, ideating, testing and learning, and then going back to the beginning of the process, rediscovering again. And the shorter the experiment, the better, because you haven't gone too far down the track where you're at the point of no return.
Yeah, and Matt Angel in the UK, you're up late. Hi, Matt. Thanks for joining us. He said he loves that concept of social capital. So on that, can you share with us, what exactly does that look like? Like, what does a lot of social capital or good social capital look like?
So research has found that it takes at least 200 hours to build up your social capital with one person, to build a trusted relationship where they will be there for you and you can be there for them in times of hardship, or, someone to really truly get advice from. So that means actually finding the right type of people who you feel bring out the best in you, who you can learn from. And that's a lot of experimentation. So just even finding the right crowd, the right tribe where you can fit in, and then build those individual relationships. You can imagine this is to start in our 30s and 40s and 50s. If we want to have, a great network of different social connections in our community, and when I say community, it's not necessarily just in our local geography. It can be still related to our industry, our professions, or it could be around an interest. It could be around a project. It could be, I guess, in your community in terms of giving. So it means something different for everyone, that there is no silver bullet and saying, this is your path. This is what makes it really interesting and hard at the same time, because you've got to go on that road of self-discovery and seeing who clicks in your life, and investing in developing relationships and really being curious about that person and being involved and supporting them. And friendships ebb and flow. So there will be periods in your life when you don't have a lot of time to see new people who you want to build up a close relationship with. But I guess the important thing is actually making time and creating those opportunities to meet lots of different types of people who give you joy, and you can give joy back to them.
And that's fascinating. On 200 hours I feel like that would have to be a very best friend, because I feel like I tend to make pretty quick friends with people and build up a lot of trust quickly. And I tend to be I trust you completely until you give me a reason not to. So I suppose that could be part of the 200 hours is determining if that trust should remain there and keep growing and getting deeper. But 200 hours just seems like a lot. If you talk to someone for an hour a week, that's almost 4 years.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you think about those really strong personal relationships, or people in your professional network, if you think back who's most important to you, they are relationships where you've had shared experiences, really intense experiences over a long period. And obviously there's some people who do it a lot faster, where people gravitate towards you and it's a lot easier. It comes very naturally for you. But then there are people who, I guess, have spent a lot of time working really hard on their careers and may not have kept that skill of building out new relationships and maintaining them as well.
Yeah, so then it gets, I guess, a bit into the depth of the relationship. So thinking about once you then transition into retirement, you have a lot more time on your hands. So if you could only spend an hour a week with these people before, maybe you can spend an entire day a week, and that's actually a completely different relationship.
Absolutely. And it's all of this is actually helping set you up so that you know who's going to be in your life, what sort of activities are you going to be doing with them, and having some of that routine already baked into your life so that it's not this total sudden shift from, being extremely busy and your phone is constantly ringing and people, having back-to-back meetings to then nothing. I think that's quite jarring for a lot of people who haven't set themselves up well. So it's giving people a taste of what they're up for so that they can transition at the pace that suits them.
Yeah, so doing a quick recap. So the 5 key ingredients are purpose or ikigai, social capital, well-being, lifelong learning, and then wealth is in there.
Correct. Those are the 5 key ingredients. And that's very much
in any order.
Yeah, because everyone's different. I find that people in our community have probably honed the vitality and the lifelong learning. That's probably something that's well baked into their lives already, and they know what they need to do, especially if they've got a financial planner already with the wealth aspect. But the hardest thing is finding what their sense of purpose is, and also what does community mean to them? How is it part of their lifestyle?
And what about, Natalie, do you at all work with the financial planners and financial advisors to make sure that they have gone through this key ingredient scorecard and see how they rate on all of these items?
Absolutely. I guess we're partnering people who really care about values. So working with values-based financial advisors is extremely important to full-time lives, because I guess if they don't believe in this, they're never going to really bring it up in their conversations with their clients. So for us, it's partnering with those organizations who really understand what it is to understand their segments and meeting their segments requirements in a way that's tailored to their needs. So for us, we don't necessarily work with everyone. It's more about the planners who understand from a values point of view, are living this sort of ethos of living a meaningful lifestyle that's full-time living. And also, I guess, have that life experience in understanding change, major change in their personal and professional careers. That's all of that incredibly important to be a trusted advisor in their clients' lives, and not just from a wealth advisory point of view, because a good advisor will empathize and hear their clients, but then add value by bringing the knowledge of what's going on in the wider world and, the demographic change, and therefore having to think about retirement very differently. And so understand that ageism can also be a barrier to what people might want to do in terms of seeking new opportunities, and just really understanding the wider landscape so that they can support them through that major change in life. And I say, and you mentioned at the beginning of this podcast that people are also going through major relationship changes as well, because often what triggers people thinking about their lives is when their youngest child leaves home. So yes. That's often a trigger point for people thinking about, well, where are we going to live? Should we downsize? Is this the time to actually move to a different community? So if these are the sorts of conversations that financial advisors are having with their clients, because at that stage in their life, then quite complementary is the advisors also asking questions around, well, do you have deep relationships in the area that you're considering moving to? And what do you do that gives you a sense of ikigai? Just having those key questions, because that can often signal whether they are truly ready for retirement or not. It's not just a tangible dashboard of numbers around the wealth aspect. I think there's other nuances that need to be considered that are potentially equally as important, because this is about people's well-being and health and happiness to lead a lifestyle. So those are things that people should be considering, and they may be thinking about those things, may not be expecting their financial advisor to bring up these topics, but a gentle prod and those sorts of conversations over a number of years help their client really think about it, experiment, can really deepen the relationship that planners have with their clients at that stage in life.
And Natalie, I know you always say that financial planners really can be a social change agent. And, a lot of the stuff we're talking about, from the wealth to the learning to the community to the ikigai, this is, all that. I know some people say the more touchy-feely stuff, but in a lot of ways, it's a lot more important. And that's actually why I left my own family business, because I kept seeing the only thing we were talking about was the investment side. And then when I would go and have these conversations with people who had never considered what they actually want retirement to look like, I was like, well, how can we know how they need to be invested if we don't know what their goals are, if they don't know what their goals are? And that's what led me to start a completely different financial planning business in 2013. And a lot of that was driven around, yes, I knew that I should be helping those people, I guess, heading into retirement. But I was like, the underlying issue here is that people aren't having these conversations sooner. And so, focusing on people sort of in their 20s to 40s to say, how early can we have these conversations about what does a full-time life look like? And you mentioned, when the last child leaves home, and I was thinking the same thing. I don't have kids, but from what I understand from sitcoms, empty nesters have that big jolt of, okay, now what do I do with my time? And especially if you had kids that were really, really active and they kind of took up your whole life. So, do you agree that these are conversations that should be had with clients of every age?
Absolutely. I started off the business only focused on baby boomers, and what I realized that it's applicable to every age. When I speak to people who hear about the 5 key ingredients and about my research to different parts of the world where there is healthy, long, so people are actually respected at every stage of their lives, people are fascinated and they go, how do I get a piece of that? So I think the message is really resonating, and everyone, no matter what age, is really thinking about how can they lead a full-time life, no matter what age.
Yeah, and I do know that financial planners are thinking about it, because I've probably talked to a couple of dozen just in the first few weeks of the year and asked, what are your top 2 professional goals this year? And also, what are your top 2 personal goals? Because it's so important that we make sure that we are equally focusing on both of those. And I'd say, well, maybe tied for top 2. Golf was a very, very popular answer. Everyone's excited to get back on the golf course when those reopen around the world. But second to that was really around balance and making sure that they have the balance in their lives to stay healthy and focus on that health piece of it. And people that want to do that lifelong learning, and whether it's continue reading or, study a new language, that it's thinking about how do they make sure that they are living that full-time life. And it's hard, and we've got so much going on. And especially during this time when so many people have their kids still at home, you've got, other people living with you, and there's just a lot of challenges. How are you seeing people either embrace the full-time living more now that we've had this sort of forced change of thinking?
What's been interesting with COVID-19 is certain people have dealt with uncertainty than others. So this is where resilience is really important. And I guess for some, it's been that realization that they didn't have enough of it. And so therefore working on building their resilience and looking at the opportunity, I guess, set themselves up for the longer term, for a sustainable lifestyle so that they can maintain good health. So I think last year was very much the time for people to really reconsider what's important to them and really deprioritize things that weren't meaningful to them anymore, that no longer had a space for them in their lives, that no longer served them. And over the Christmas, New Year break, I was applying the Marie Kondo method.
Oh, and I think Natalie's power might have just died. She just needs to plug in her power. So this is one of the joys of doing a live stream. So we'll give her just a minute to come back. And any questions that people have, feel free to pop those in. And again, the five key ingredients to full-time living applicable to both financial planners and advisors and your clients at every stage of life is on purpose, or the Japanese word for that is ikigai. And as Natalie was explaining, it's deeper than just what gets you out of bed in the morning. It's about what is your bigger purpose. How are you giving back, and how are you truly fulfilled in life? And in no particular order, I understand. Another one is on social capital, which is a really interesting one to think about. And I'd love to see if there's a way to measure that. There's this saying that you are the combination of the 5 people you spend the most time with. And so thinking about, who are those people? Are they people that lift you up? Because it's easy. I think we've all had times in our lives to be surrounded by people that you may not realize don't lift you up, and they are not actually helping you become the best version of you. So is it those first uh oh, Adam Owen just saying the 5 key ingredients were brilliant. I agree, Adam, and I'll see if I can get that scorecard from Natalie, because it's an interesting and a different way of looking at it. I hadn't actually heard it put exactly this way. We talk so much about financial coaching and changing the conversation, but having actual ingredients. And I like the way that she uses ingredients because, as she said, it's going to be a different amount for everyone. Some people might be focused a little more on, well-being, or more on lifelong learning, which are 2 of the other ones. So I'm sure Natalie's going to pop back here in a minute, and I want to chat with her a little more on that lifelong learning bit. Definitely the well-being, because that can cover so many different areas. We definitely hear about financial well-being, but then thinking the mental well-being and sort of health well-being. So Adam's just asking, who are my 5 people? Well, Adam, I believe you know that you are definitely one. We talk every single day, and you have made a tremendous difference in my life since we got to know each other last year, all throughout the pandemic. And the way that you lift people up, and you are a huge champion. Somebody else even said earlier today, and I couldn't have agreed more, how you see things in people that they don't even see in themselves. And the world absolutely needs more people like that. My husband, definitely one of them. Also, hands down, my best friend. My mother would be one of the 5. My best friend, Jess. And then I'd probably have a 2-way tie, hilariously, 2 best friends, both named Matt. So all good people that, you think of those people, if something happens, who can I turn to? If I'm having a bad day, who would I call that would absolutely be there for me? And we all need those people in our life. So we'll see if Natalie comes back. If she doesn't, I have to say that one of the reasons I wanted Natalie for this first one, for those that joined the live stream yesterday, is I've had a ton of internet issues, and I was talking to Natalie about that because we've been trying to schedule getting her on. And she was super nice and said, look, if everything goes to crap and it doesn't work, we can always re-record. So that's what this is all about. And I was also thinking before this that one of the conversations I used to always have with clients when they would think about what is, maybe going to happen in their life, I would always go through this exercise until it got to a ridiculous place of, what is the worst thing that can happen? So let's say they're thinking about changing jobs. And you just kind of keep going further and further, like a kid that's always going, well, why? And you're like, how deep can you go in this conversation? Just keep going deeper until you're like, okay, the worst thing that could happen is that an ice truck comes and buries my car, and then it somehow catches on fire, and just things that could never ever happen. And you're like, okay, it's not that bad. So that's why I finally decided to dive in and do the live stream, because I was like, what is the very worst that can happen? Really, nothing is that bad. So with that, I might wrap it up, just since Nat hasn't come back on yet, and we can always try. Oh, she just messaged. She is trying to get back on. So we'll give it just another minute. And for the podcast, I'll edit this down. But thank you all for sticking with me and seeing the joys of doing live broadcasting. It's actually a great lesson in life. You just have to go with the flow. And in a lot of ways, I would say you are all making a big life change in clients' lives, but this isn't, we're not performing open heart surgery. So again, it's not all that bad. So I know she is hopping back in right now, and there she is. So she's just connecting, and we will bring her back on. Hello, hello.
Hello, I'm so sorry about that.
Not a problem at all. I was just doing a fun little riff monologue on how this is how it goes, and it's perfectly fine. And I was recapping the 5 key ingredients. We have Adam joining very late, also in the UK, mentioning how much he loved those 5 ingredients. So is there a graphic I'll be able to get from you on that to share in those show notes?
Absolutely. We'll put it in the show notes for everyone to refer to, along with some other resources.
Yeah, perfect. And one of the ones I wanted to touch on that I mentioned when you popped away was on well-being. And, I think a lot of the conversations happening nowadays is on financial well-being. But what is your take on what financial planners should be looking at in terms of well-being with their clients?
I think when it comes to well-being, it's a number of different things. So it's the physical aspect. I guess this is something that a lot of people are quite aware of, in terms of, doing enough exercise and, making sure that their health is in top notch and eating the right things. Those are the really obvious things. I think increasingly mental health is something that more and more people are having to look after, because it can obviously be quite debilitating if you have to stop work and no longer have an income stream, if it leads to that. So I guess, where preventable, if that can be something that people have. This is where social support, social connections are extremely important in terms of addressing, the potential for mental health issues. So it's having that awareness. I'm not necessarily saying that advisors need to suddenly become counsellors or therapists, but just having that awareness that, if you don't have the right sort of lifestyle, health, well-being point of view, it can lead to other problems, and it can create, great expense and, impact the wealth side of things to a degree if things escalate. The cost of health can be quite expensive in some countries in the world. Yeah. So it's really, that awareness that clients don't exactly exist in a bubble. There are many different factors in their lives that can affect their well-being, and that's physical, mental, and even the spiritual signs. So I talked earlier on about the blue zones, and the blue zones are where people live much longer life expectancies than their compatriots in their country. So in the case of Loma Linda and Okinawa, where I visited, those are 2 places where I noticed that it's its own form of spirituality. So whether it's a religion, it's formalized, or it's a connection with something, a higher being. And in Okinawa, there's great respect for nature. So there's no shrines or temples like the rest of Japan, but there's a belief that there are spirits within nature, like within trees or within a cave. So you don't see any representation of it like in other religions, but people have this belief that it's really important to respect Earth and the I guess the seasons. So that's quite ingrained in their philosophy towards life. So that's something that you don't necessarily talk about, but there's definitely some research that shows that that can impact people's happiness and health. And it's just something to bear in mind, not necessarily come up in conversation, but if advisors are thinking about applying the key ingredients to their own lifestyle and into their ethos of how they want to live, so that they can, see what do they need to balance out, what do they need more of. And there's quite a lot of research around the importance of connecting with nature. So that's something everyone can do. And that's something that everyone has access to as well.
Yes, and Adam's just mentioning, gardening, he's heard is really popular among people in their 80s and 90s. And honestly, we're actually planning on moving in a couple of weeks. We've always lived in condos and apartments and townhouses, and we realized we actually never thought we would want a yard. But following COVID, we have actually thought so many times about how we wish we had a garden and we could be out there. And just in our little concrete porch here in the desert, we brilliantly tried to grow cucumbers and tomatoes and lemons and jalapenos and all these things that wouldn't grow. And we're like, oh, it would be so fun to have that and that excuse to get out in that fresh air. So Adam, I completely agree. And Natalie, it sounds like you're supporting that. We know the health and wellness of being outside and being in the earth and actually touching the earth is super powerful.
Absolutely. The Okinawans, who are centenarians, like people living beyond 100, all had their little gardens. And what's interesting about gardening is that they're growing their own vegetables and herbs. It also became a social thing. So it was always an excuse that if you had any excess things growing in your garden, you could knock on your neighbour's door and share that abundance with your neighbours. So that's a really beautiful thing of connecting with the people around you without looking like you're nosy and wondering what's going on or wanting to chat. Like, no one's going to turn down a bunch of carrots if someone, gives them to you on your front door.
That's fantastic. So Natalie, you mentioned you have some resources and some that you'll share, but a lot of what you guys do is create products to help financial planners have those conversations. And I would imagine that those conversations and those resources would be applicable to people all over the world. So can you share with us what some of those resources look like?
Absolutely. So one of the physical resources that our financial planner partners use is these conversation starters in a pack. So basically it's the Full-Time Life Starter. All it is, it's a bunch of cards that each card is, very visual, it's brightly colored, and it just gets people to start thinking about a bunch of different ideas. And it's just sparking that inspiration. So financial planners will often use this in early stages of their conversations with their prospects or clients, in just having something fun and physical, and they're brightly colored, they've been tagged on the back with the 5 key ingredients. And so sometimes our planners give it to their clients as a giveaway so that they can go away and do it in their own time and sift through it. We give them templates for clients to do homework. So it just means that the meaningful conversations and the thinking experimentation can happen in between meetings, so that when they do meet with their clients, the conversation's more about how has that client evolved their plan, how they started to apply it. So that, for me, is important. It's not just the planning, it's not just the goal setting, it's taking it to that next step so that you can actually show that that person's life has actually changed. It might seem like those week-long experiments aren't going to change things, but if that happens, they don't necessarily want to move to a totally different environment and, sell their home in the big city just yet. That's a great piece of advice and learning that client has taken away from having a conversation with their planner. So it's really giving the planners an easy way to really connect with their clients in fun ways. And that's what's been really important in terms of surfacing the insights and talking to the consumers who are going through this change, that they don't necessarily want to be bombarded with all the negative things. They don't necessarily want to be told about high depression rates, particularly in men in their 80s, retired. They don't necessarily want to, have hard conversations about the ageism that might happen in the workforce. But if you can give them really fun, positive things to just think about, that are seeded with that scientific basis around what leads to a meaningful, healthy and connected life, then that's something that will save them time in terms of helping their client really get to some answers. And these are very big existential questions. So it's not something that you come up with within a few weeks. It's something that it takes time to process and apply and try different things over a number of years and even decades.
Yeah, and I really like that focus on positive reinforcement rather than negative. It is so easy to say, if you do this, that's not going to work out, or this is going to be bad, or we've got enough negativity in the world. So that's fantastic to say, here are some really great examples of things. Here are really positive reinforcements and good things that you can look forward to and think about. That's a nice angle.
The other thing is stories. So people's stories. So not necessarily stories about celebrities, really well-off people, but showing that there's so many different paths people can take. And I guess if people can take away from their planner that it's up to them to create their own path, and there's no right or wrong answer as to how do you create your next chapter or what that looks like. If you can inspire them by showing a lot of different examples of diverse ways to make that transition, then their clients are going to take something away from that. And that's another way of couching it in a really positive way without necessarily preaching.
And that also helps to shift that conversation away from traditional retirement of, hey, save X amount of money by the time you're Y age and then live off it. And I joke, you can only clean the garage so many times. I can't believe how many times I heard that from people. They're like, well, I've got to clean the garage, and I've got to rearrange some stuff, and I've got to paint the house. And it's like, well, call me in 6 months, because that's not going to take the next 30 years.
Yeah, and it's a really good point that people often fill their time with things that aren't necessarily meaningful. And it's so easy to get caught up with things that aren't necessarily important, don't give you that sense of fulfillment and satisfaction. Because the other thing that happens, if people around you see that you seem to have a lot of spare time and you're not really leading something, a meaningful lifestyle, like when you were thriving as in your career, they'll give you stuff. So you want to be in control of that. It's all well and good if it's something you want to do, like babysitting your grandchildren, but it's also about having the boundaries. Well, it's all well and good to babysit your grandchildren, but having some structure around that in terms of when and how often, instead of the void completely being taken up, so that that's the only thing that you have time for and don't have any time for yourself to do the other things that might give you that sense of well-being.
Yes, and I just had it up there. Matt mentioned, how many planners focus on, okay, maybe you're going to travel when you get to retirement, or let's focus on going on a cruise every year. And that circles right back to those experiences of, I know a lot of people that didn't ever travel until they got into retirement. And maybe you go on 2 or 3 cruises and you're like, okay, I don't need to do this every year, or maybe once every 5 years or something. But if you had tried that sooner, then you would have known what you wanted to budget for a bit better in terms of your experiences, in addition to the financial aspect in retirement.
Yeah, the concept of 100-year life is that there's 3 phases that we cycle through a number of times over the course of our lifetime. So the traditional model of study, work, retire isn't something that you do just once. It's something that you do every few years. So that opportunity to restore and rest and relearn something before you then embark on that next project or work stage of your life, so that you are focusing on the right things that are open to you and what you really feel that you want to do at that point in time. It just means that you're experiencing a richer life over a number of different stages of your life, depending on, I guess where your family's at in terms of how much wealth you might have at the time. It gives you a little bit more flexibility, because the thing that we can't predict is what is our health going to look like in our 60s, 70s, 80s. So if we can enjoy things much earlier in life rather than waiting, and also we can't predict what our family's health is going to be like either. So if there's certain things that you can do now or in the shorter term, then it means that you're able to live that full, healthy life today.
Wonderful. I love that. Natalie, thank you so much for coming on, for being the first guest to brave the live streaming world. It is great to have you. I will link to all of those resources, and that scorecard you mentioned. Is that something that planners can have access to and do that with their clients?
Absolutely. I'll give you the link for our transition quiz.
Okay, fantastic. And I'm not trying to plant this question, but Natalie, is there anything you're really looking forward to in the next few months?
The next few months, I would say coming and doing your video challenge. So I think this is the year that I'm really keen to get our message to more people. So up until now, it was very much our community of people who are at various different stages of retirement. And the next stage of our journey for full-time lives has been to actually do more work with financial planners who are values-based, who are very focused on their pre-retiree clients. So I think the way to do that is through video. So that's one highlight I'm looking forward to next month.
That's awesome. And we're really excited to have you. And I'm co-hosting that video creation masterclass that kicks off on the 1st of February with Adam Owen, who has been here joining us, and Matt Angel is in the masterclass as well. And Natalie, just as you're talking about building community and the fact that a lot of it can't even be in person right now. And I mentioned I've met Adam and gotten to know him, and to the point where, we're building businesses together across the pond, is, just really shows the power of video, of having that connection, of being able to just get to know people in, I'm going to say the only thing that sort of replaces in person is through video. So excited to have you and see more financial planners using video as a way to reach more people, spread the value of advice, and honestly have a lot of fun. How much fun has it been doing?
Absolutely. I enjoyed getting to know you too, Kate. And that's been the power of video.
Yes, hands down. Wonderful. Well, Natalie, go enjoy that beautiful weather for all of us. We've got people in the UK. It's dark and cold there. It's surprisingly dark and cold here for early afternoon. And I'll look forward to seeing you in the masterclass next week.
Stay warm. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you. Ciao.
Bye.